This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Hey, business storytellers. Thanks for joining me. Episode 624, Bruce Shutan is joining us today. He is a ghostwriter and journalist, and we want to talk about finding your personal voice in writing. And what's interesting to me about this is easier said than done, first of all. And sometimes I think people don't even have a voice in writing, but they know what they want to sound like. So that's a big difference from how you actually sound to what you want to sound like. But we're going to dive into that topic. Well, before we do that, however, I want to show this to you. In Grammarly now, you can actually set it to specific areas in how you want your voice to sound. So something to think about. If you use Grammarly, you can actually do that. Just head on over to Grammarly.com. I don't have an affiliate link handy right here, so check it out. No matter what, it is definitely a tool worth trying, and you can now set it casual writing, formal writing, whatever it might be. So that's one way to hone in on your personal voice in writing. Of course, you can do it yourself. You can also do it through ghostwriting. And Bruce is a ghostwriter, journalist, and we will put up his website here, bruceshutan.com. You can visit that when you like. But let's find out, how do we find our personal voice in writing? Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Thanks for having me, Christoph.
You bet. We just connected not too long ago, and certainly I was looking for somebody to talk about developing your personal voice, and you showed up. You were one of the top results. So welcome to Christoph's Content Corner. That's everything behind me, my small part of the world. All right. So let's talk about what happens when people want to find their personal writing voice. How do you go about that? And whether it's they want to write their own stuff or they want to hire a ghostwriter.
Well, it's a good question, Christoph, and I think probably it comes down to the bottom line. If someone has the disposable income to be able to hire a professional like myself, a ghostwriter, I also happen to be a journalist, and I do think that those skills are transferable very nicely into ghostwriting. In terms of organizational purposes, that's probably one place to start. And hiring a ghostwriter is not for the faint of heart. I mean, there are several price points, and it can start anywhere from a couple of $1,000s for a book, let's say a business book. In the basic bucket, I like to call those ghostwriter mills. They tend to overpromise and underdeliver. So you could be shelling out anywhere from, let's say, $5,000 to $10,000 for that service. Caveat emptor, you always have to be careful about getting what you pay for. And then somewhere in the middle bucket, again, for the purpose of writing a book, let's say probably about 30,000 words on average, you'll get someone like myself who can come in and help find your voice, all the heavy lifting. Really, the number one reason I think people will hire a ghostwriter is they don't have the time. So the ghostwriter can go ahead and do all that heavy lifting. That price point could vary anywhere from about $15,000 to $50,000. And then you've got the elite of the elite who could be starting at about $75K, and in many cases, six figures. These are folks who will also share the book cover title with the author in many cases. Case in point, Bill O'Reilly, the author of the Killing series. We all know him from Fox News and some of the infamy of sexual harassment charges that drummed him completely out of the network. He's written a series of very highly successful books with Martin Dugard, his ghostwriter who gets second billing on the covers. And so, a lot of celebrities and professional athletes, politicians, they have ghosts like myself who come in because really, as I said earlier, they don't have the time. And in most cases, they don't have the eloquence, the expertise to be able to cobble together clean sentences.
So it's interesting to me, of course, Bill O'Reilly. I mean, I would think that like an example like him be maybe not super easy, but it'd be relatively easy to hit his voice, right? Because you can literally just pop in whatever the Bill O'Reilly show or whatever it used to be on Fox, and you can kind of get his voice, right? This is his public persona. But then we also have, let's say, some of these CEOs who now want to be more publicly branded, who want to have thought leadership articles, and they're not really out there all the time publicly. I mean, maybe behind the scenes, right? They're talking to people one-on-one and whatever it might be. How do they find their voice? Like how, and it, how do they even know what it should be? And then how do we make sure it gets hit? And how authentic does it need to be? That's way too many questions to answer in one segment. So let's maybe break them down. But how do they know what their writing voice even should be if they're not a Bill O'Reilly?
Well, I guess it really goes to their personality. I mean, some people like to speak in staccato type of clipped sentences where they're nice and short. There's a lot of italics in their speaking style. I do think that technology helps a lot, especially if you want to try to do this on your own. I know that for almost a year now, I've been using an AI bot as a tool for all of my interviews. I used to have an actual person transcribing each interview that I did for magazine articles, for books. And she ended up in ship and going into a completely different profession. And I was kind of going that way anyway with a few other clients of mine. It's amazing how well the technology is capturing conversations. And in the case for me, I've been using Otter AI for $99 a year. It's been really the best investment I've made all year long. And it's amazing because obviously the technology is not going to pick up every word, but on those words that leave you scratching your head, you could go back to the recording and listen to it, and there's a bouncing ball like you used to see in the cartoons years ago, and it will just bounce on each word. So, and you can do a search in the file and easily find those words that are kind of jumbled and not making sense, and you can go in and correct it. Though I do think in order to capture your authentic voice and to be your authentic self, you have to write very much, I think, like you speak. And I know that that seems to be the highest compliment that people will pay myself, and I think others, is, oh, you write a lot like you talk. And I think that's ultimately what you want to do, is try to capture that. And so I definitely recommend using technology to help make that happen and to try to keep it conversational. I think a lot of folks who are not professional writers are mistaken when they think that they have to string together a lot of 50-cent words and have the dictionary close by to make them sound smarter. But look at Ernest Hemingway. I mean, one of the greatest writers of all time. And his prose was so simple and clean. John Steinbeck is another example, one of my favorite authors. And really, I think clarity ultimately, along with trying to capture one's personality and write the way you speak, are the goals here.
So what's interesting about that is, so I did throw up the Otter AI link up here. So if you want to scan that, that is an affiliate link, obviously, in this case. But I'm a big fan of Otter AI. In fact, most likely this episode, we'll just dump it into Otter AI. It'll transcribe it, and then I'll say, hey, give me a couple quotes from Bruce, for an article or whatever it might be. And it comes back in your voice. So it is one of the easiest tools to use. You can live record, you can actually live transcribe right now, which I hardly ever do, Bruce, because I usually forget for the live streams to click the button. For meeting, it just automatically turns on. So I always there's a group of people out there that will argue that, oh, if technology can do it, why do I still need a person? So my question here very naturally flows into, so if AI can do it, why do I still need a writer? I personally think you still do, because Otter AI, or even if you use Claude AI or Chat GPT or whatever it might be, they're not they help you, but they're not always correct. I could go to Claude AI today and say, hey, write me a quote from Bruce Shutan, and it'll just make up some stuff. Doesn't even know who you are, unless, I don't know if it's tied to the internet, maybe it is, but it just makes it up, right? So talk to me about the right balance between using technology and um, using people to help you find your voice.
So, Christoph, you have asked what I consider to be the $64,000 question. And writers like myself have been wondering about this. I think the use of generative AI, and I just did a story about this for one of the trade magazines I write for. It's both exciting and exhilarating on the one hand, and absolutely terrifying on the other. And you've got a lot of ethical concerns rolled into that. I have no idea how this is going to shake out. And the other thing, too, is we're now reading articles about how this is rolling into schools. High school students using Chat GTP to write their papers, and teachers not being able to tell the difference, is taking the lazy way out of assignments. This is a brave new world that we're entering, and I'm not really sure what the answers are. Certainly, generative AI should be considered a tool. I don't think that there's ever going to be a substitute for the human voice, especially when you get into the writing, which is an art form. It's not a science. And I think that when you're talking about things that are subjective, they have subjective value. There's no right way or wrong way to write, other than grammar and the rules, of course, of language. But really, as you had said earlier, the technology has a blind spot. It's not going to get everything right. So there's an integrity issue there that people always have to bear in mind. So it is kind of a balancing act here that we obviously need to strongly consider technology to make all of this so much easier. But we don't want to go down that rabbit hole too, in terms of completely turning it over to technology, removing the human element, and then we get into a lot of trouble.
You know what's interesting to me too is, I actually used 11 Labs, right, to clone my voice, and then I did an entire podcast episode, not like this, not like me talking with somebody, but just me talking with my cloned voice. Didn't sound horrible. I wouldn't say it sounded the best, quite frankly. It didn't sound exactly like me, but it was close enough. So certainly there's opportunities. But as you were talking about, how AI might advance, I was thinking about, why does it even matter to have a personal voice in your content? And so the reason I bring that up is because Some people might say, why do I even care? Like the chat GPT voice, oh, that's fine. That's fine, right? Like whatever. Nobody notices. Maybe some people don't notice. But when somebody has a really strong personal voice, I mean, I was just looking at that earlier today, actually. This writer, it's very, I would describe it as snappy, opinionated, like in your face, kind of. Like it's very clear who wrote that. That's that person's voice. But what do you say to the people that say, oh, it doesn't matter? I don't need some distinct voice. It's close enough.
So distinct is the operative word, Christoph. If somebody really doesn't care, they're not going to be distinguished. You're not, the consumer is not going to pick up on anything that's distinct at all about this person. They're just going to go to average. It's going to be, kind of a race to the bottom, if you will. And certainly, we all have free will and can decide to be as good or bad as we like. But when you're talking about communication and writing, getting your voice out there, what is the point of even doing unless you want to be distinguished and have your distinctive, unique voice come through, especially if you have a certain speaking style and a strong personality with opinions? The technology is just not going to capture it.
I think it's very true. And then certainly technology might get better over time. But I think it's important then we have the whole copyright thing anyways, right? If it's completely AI generated, it's not copyrightable. So, I mean, that's pretty well established already. So how do you work with a client when somebody comes in and says, hey, here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to be out there more. Maybe let's not focus on a book. I think that's kind of I mean, people do that certainly, and we've had shows about that, but let's focus on like website content, right? If you work with somebody who wants to do blog posts or guest pieces for trade publications, how do you get what their writing voice, what their voice in writing should look like, or not look like, sound like? How do you get that out of them?
That's an outstanding question. I will say this, that it's hard to get a sense of somebody's voice right away. You're going to need a little bit of time to get to know them. But what I try to do instead is just focus on ghostwriting the very best possible content and just aim very high to raise that bar up as high as I can, and to use my journalistic skills, tell the story, to get the best possible narrative out there, and then just let the chips fall where they may. And I'm able to get a satisfied customer every time, just using that approach. So I just strive for the excellence as opposed to trying necessarily to capture their voice. But everybody's different. Some people really want you to try to make more of a concerted effort to capture that voice, as opposed to just doing it in your own voice and trying to go for the best possible writing. Now, I haven't really come across that very much. I will say this, right now, it's a bit of a challenge for me. I'm ghostwriting a book that has not one, but two co-authors. And this was a last minute change. I was going to work with one person. She brought another person on. They have distinctly different voices. So that's a bit of a challenge. But again, I kind of throw the rule out the window on trying to capture both of their voices and just let the story tell itself to the best of my ability as a journalist and a book ghostwriter. And obviously, they're going to vet whatever I ghostwrite to make sure that they're completely comfortable with it.
What I always like about former journalists, they have at least the good ones have the skills to ask good questions, right? They get the tidbits out of people. Excuse me, they get the tidbits out of people that maybe they weren't even thinking about themselves. So certainly, I think that's always a big advantage of working with former journalists. I'm one by myself. It's been certainly a while where I've worked in true B2C journalism, B2B more recently, but certainly I've been down that road as well. The other thing, and I think you kind of embedded this in your answer, is if you hit somebody's voice too closely, it can actually be kind of annoying, right? So I'll give you an example. I grew up in Germany. My English is way better today than it was 25 years ago. And when journalists quoted me back in my days as a football player, you still see my helmet back there. Um, Sometimes they would say it exactly like how I said it, right? Which wasn't proper English, and it looked horrible in print. Maybe it's cute or whatever on TV, or not cute, but maybe it has character on TV, but on in print, it looked horrible because it wasn't an accurate sentence. So sometimes just keep that in mind. Being too close to what they actually sound like could actually backfire because it's not going to work for the audience. I mean, do you agree with that or no?
Absolutely. And, I routinely clean up quotes. And I've been a B2B journalist for 35 of my 40 years in journalism, the first 5 in newspapers, where it's pretty verboten to do that. It's more of a hands-off approach. But with B2B, the emphasis is on solutions as opposed to problems, trying to help people do a better job in whatever their industry is. There are trade magazines for every industry under the that you could possibly think of. So yes, that's an excellent point, because you don't want to regurgitate bad grammar and incorrect use of language and diction problems and all of that.
Just fix it for the people. There's no reason to put that out there. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, that's why the professionals like me come in to try to clean that up.
Absolutely. Bruce, it was nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. For everyone watching the live stream, we're going to be taking a little bit of a break here as I'm going through some medical procedures. If you're listening on the podcast channels, you shouldn't notice at all because we're scheduled out every few days through the end of October. But if you are watching on the live stream, you might notice there'll be a little bit of a lull on LinkedIn for the next few weeks. Bruce, to wrap us up here, tell us about who should reach out to you, who's your perfect client, and of course, good luck with everything, and thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks, Christoph. I will say that since I've been at it as long as I have been, in terms of content, I'll do anything from blogs to articles that are published in magazines, website content, and books. Those are the big ones. People can reach me through my website easily. You could just Google me and my website will come up, and it's bruceshutan.com. Pretty straightforward. And I'm based in Portland, Oregon, and always welcome anyone to get in touch.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. See you then.